in Central Asia. The Quduri text, often it's just referred to as Quduri. The Quduri text is one that is very important. If someone can make that part of their library because it is now in English, and I normally don't give endorsements because of how strict my criterion are, but I believe, in all honesty, that the brother who did the translation has done it more than its justice and has accurately captured the words of that Imam. And so those that hold on to the school of Imam Abu Hanifa, it behooves you, it is incumbent upon you to find this text, to buy it, and make it part of your library. Otherwise, you are doomed to spending years and years of your life not knowing, meeting lukewarm teachers who pull you this way and that way, and you're like windshield wipers on a car. You need to return to order and a systematic discipline. This book has it. So I believe it behooves you, and it's within your best interests. We have Abu Ali al-Hashimi, who died in 428AH. He famously went to the grave of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah and kissed the base of it. And one of his students with him said, "Why did you do this?" He said, "I was not kissing the grave, but actually I was intending to kiss the feet of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah." So this is the difference that he had. I wasn't intending on kissing the grave. I was intending on kissing the feet of the one who was in the grave. From the years 423 to 430AH, the power base of the Seljuk Turks reached critical mass in this year, and they conquered Khurasan with ease. Now this is important because as the Abbasids begin to fade into the sunset of their Khilafah, Allah starts to bring in the Seljuk Turks. They already make up most of their court. The tribes that the Abbasid men married into of the Turkish women are, interestingly enough, from the same tribes of the Seljuks that are now coming into their own, that are bringing this religion with severity. The Seljuks are famously known for having one of their rulers having conquered a Shia area and being begged by the heads of that city, "Please spare our lives." And the Seljuk ruler said, "I will not spare your life unless you can produce one man amongst you who bears the name Abu Bakr, because I know that it will be by the qadr of Allah that I should spare your lives." And they produced one man from amongst them named Abu Bakr. One man. That tells you about the Seljuks as a people. Were they sitting on platforms, hugging and smooching and compromising on creedal issues? They didn't. You don't get any stronger than them in the Orthodox Creed. And it was mentioned by Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, as we'll discuss later, that in that time, he said, it was the Turks that were bringing the religion. The Arabs were displaced. It was the Turks that were bringing the religion. And we'll read, inshallah, a little bit about this later. The Seljuk Turks were the ones that were bringing the religion. And when they became Muslim, they took it and they ran with it. They were Hanafis. The Seljuk Turks, they were Hanafis. The deaths in this year include Abdul Qahir al-Baghdadi in 429AH. He is the gatherer and codifier of Ash'ari doctrines in one book, and he attempted to reconcile them and explain them. I've just got the book here in class. I'll just show it to you here for your own means. It's this book here, Usul ad-Din. This, for someone who studies advanced or intermediate to advanced Ash'ari creed, absolutely essential, because it will explain why you will find 3 books written by 3 Ash'ari scholars, and there will be such significant differences, not in branch issues, in significant issues. Why did this happen? And he brings it together, he reconciles them. By the end of the book, you have an understanding of, okay, I understand the dependent upon positions within the Ash'ari school. Nowadays, one of the reasons why Ash'aris tend to be classed by some people who don't deserve fame and name that they are not from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is because they don't know how to read the Mu'tamid books. Every science with Islam has its Mu'tamid books. In Arabic language, the Mu'tamid is Al-Ajrumiyyah. You want to study the Arabic. Want to study Hanbali fiqh? Fine. Mu'tamid books are the Muqni' and any commentaries upon it. Zad al-Mustaqni', Dalil al-Talib, its commentaries. If you want to study Hanbali Creed, the Lum'a, the Al-Ain wal-Athar, these other texts, you want to study Maturidi, you want to have to study and memorize Abu Hafs al-Nasafi, his Aqa'id al-Nasafi, Ash'ari, Al-Kharidat al-Bahiyya, al-Barahin. When you want to study something, you study the foundational sources that are depended upon by the people. But when you study from each and every book and you grab from each and every place, well, no wonder you're confused. No wonder. Because knowledge is laid down. Knowledge is documented. And that's why it's so significant. From 431 to 458, a massive earthquake rocked Tabriz in 434 AH and wiped the city off the map. And this remained the case for some years. The Seljuks continued to make massive advances after 435 AH by conquering Rai and displacing the Shia armies in the area. The Seljuks were known for their fantastic bravery, where there would be one horse against 50 horses, one man against 30 men. They were known for their fantastic bravery. Sometimes people couldn't believe the stories that came back regarding the Turks. No, this is impossible. No one on earth does this in a battle, or no one would be this chivalrous or this brave. It's impossible. But it was true. Now, what the Turks did, which was different to what the Arabs did with regards to Hanafi fiqh, is the Seljuk Turks, because they were not in power yet, they began to gather and systematize the books. Because so many of the ones in Baghdad were Mu'tazila, they began to ride behind and gather among themselves the Hanafis in Central Asia. And that put pressure on the Arab Hanafis. And that led to conversions of some of the Arab Hanafis from the Mu'tazila into the proper creed. Seljuks, almost wholly Maturidi, already had an understanding of administration. And it wasn't a matter of if, but when they were going to displace the Abbasids or whoever was in the way. Because they were on a winning streak that was not capable of being stopped by any of the armies in their time. They had the quickest horses and they rode ponies. They did not ride full-grown horses. They rode ponies. Because ponies were faster, ponies were quicker, and ponies, if you had smaller soldiers, because many of the Seljuks were lightweight, if you had smaller soldiers, although the ponies couldn't carry as much, they were more aerodynamic in battle. And the Seljuks used those. The Seljuks also depended upon their hand-to-hand combat and sword strokes. Many armies by that time, and especially the Abbasids, who had taken from Persian culture, were using a standard phalanx, where you have 10 guys across, 10 men deep, and you're all marching. And it was nothing for the Seljuks to, if they kill the actual leader or the bugle caller, or they kill the 2 flag carriers, then the army's in disarray. That's how they win many of their battles. If we just kill your main 2 people, you have no army. You have no general to tell you where you go. You have no flag caller, so you can't see your flag. You don't know what's happened, and before you know it, most of you are dead, or you're prisoner. What do you think about Islam? And that would be the end of the matter. And that's how they spread over Central Asia, and they started coming closer into the Arab world. And the Arabs couldn't do anything because they were finished by this time for the most part. Now, during this time, around 440 AH, the Hanbalis, who were the influential outsiders along with the Malikis, as they were self-sufficient from Abbasid patronage, they grew in strength and became chief Qadis up until this time. They continued to grow, and they were the executioners, market walkers, court justices during this time. When Ibn Makula, the Shafi'i judge, died in the year 447 AH, the Khalifa of the time, Al-Qa'im bi'amrillah, asked Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la numerous times to take the position of chief Qadi over the empire, but each time he refused. The reason for Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la's refusal is Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la did not want to go into the government. He stayed independent so he could continue to give the fatwa that he wanted to give and that he needed to give. Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la is significant. Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la, he died 458 Hijri. We're going to be talking about him in a moment. He is considered by many of his time as one of the revivers of the religion in his time. One of the mujaddids, the Shaykh al-Islam of his time. He had over 500 students. In his gathering for hadith, one of the students who was in the class said, we used to think that it was either during or after one of the 5 times salahs because there were so many people. We used to think it was the salah time because there were that many people writing hadith. It was that crowded. Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la dealt with issues around his time because the Ash'aris, and some of them in Baghdad, some of them had different theological beliefs, and he believed that their being in Baghdad or being in the positions that they were in was dangerous. So he began to engage in lengthy discussions with them. He prefaced his discussion by saying in volume 2 of Tabaqat al-Hanabila that the Ash'aris were from Ahlul Hadith, meaning they were from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but that their positions opened doors and led to divergencies that could not be explained, and divergencies that could not be accepted and that would lead the layman astray. And they had lengthy discussions, huge disputes. And the main thing that stood out about Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la during this time was that he and the other ulama were watching the Abbasids erode and deteriorate. And they decided, because the ulama are those that control the matters of the ummah in reality, they decided that we will do nothing. Let it collapse unless Allah brings about some other affair. Let it collapse. Al-Qa'im bin Amrillah kept coming to Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la and saying, why don't you become the chief Qadi? And he refused to. He refused to consistently. Until finally he asked him one time, and Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la, when he came to him, he said, I will do it on the following conditions. Number 1, that he will not be required to attend any processions, coronations for himself or the Khalifa. Number 2, he will retain his independence in all affairs and future matters. Number 3, that he is never brought to the house of the Sultan and not asked to assume it at any time. And number 4, he will always approach his place of judgment from a different door, and he will leave in charge who he chooses. When the Khalifa agreed to this, the Khalifa deposed himself and put Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la and all the ulama around him back in charge of the ummah again, without even realizing that he'd done it. When he agreed that, when he said, sure, I agree to all the charges, listen to what the agreement was. He will not be required to attend any processions, coronations for himself or the Khalifa. That has to do with the authority of the Khalifa. He's not required to do any of that. Number 2, he will retain his independence in all affairs and in future matters. So that guaranteed him and all the ulama that would come after would be free. Number 3, he is never brought to the house of the Sultan and not to assume it at any time. Meaning the Khilafah, he doesn't need it. The ulama don't need it. They're the ones that bring it about. And then finally, number 4, he will approach his place from a different door and he will leave in charge who he chooses. Meaning Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la will leave in charge who he chooses. By doing that, after more than a century, out of power of leading the ulama, the ummah, the ulama were back in. The ulama were back in. Back in charge of the ummah, back in control of the ummah, back in control of the Khilafah system, back in control of the judiciary, back in control of administration, back in control of the affairs of zakah and distributing it and sending out. They were completely back in control again. And the Khalifa